History is filled with legendary warriors, right? We all know the Spartans, standing firm at Thermopylae, and the samurai, with their unyielding code of Bushido. Their stories are epic, etched into our minds. But what if I told you that for every Spartan or samurai, there were countless other warrior cultures, just as fearsome, just as skilled, and just as fascinating, whose stories have been lost to the winds of time? Today, we're pulling back the curtain of history to shine a light on these forgotten legends. We're going on a journey across continents and centuries to meet the greatest warriors you've probably never heard of. Forget what you think you know about ancient warfare. Prepare to be amazed! Let's start our journey in ancient Europe, but not in Greece or Rome. Let's travel north, to the misty lands of what is now Spain and Portugal. Here lived the Celti-Iberians, a people born from the fusion of Celts and native Iberians. The Romans, who were masters of warfare themselves, had a healthy respect and a bent fear for these warriors. What made the Celtiberians so formidable? It was a combination of their environment, their culture, and their weaponry. They were masters of guerrilla warfare, using the rugged, mountainous terrain to their advantage. They would strike hard and fast, then melt back into the hills before a larger force could respond. This wasn't just random raiding, it was a calculated strategy that frustrated Roman legions for nearly 2 centuries. Their most iconic weapon was the gladius hispaniensis, the Hispanic sword. This short, double-edged sword was so effective, so perfectly designed for close-quarters combat, that the Romans adopted it as their own. That's right, the very sword that helped Rome build its empire was a Celtiberian invention. So next time you see a Roman legionary in a movie, remember that his deadliest weapon came from the very people he was fighting. The Celti-Iberians were not just wild tribesmen, they were innovative weaponsmiths and brilliant tacticians whose legacy was literally forged into the steel of their conquerors. Now, let's journey east to the sweeping steppes of Eurasia. This vast, open landscape was the birthplace of some of history's most dominant horsemen. We've all heard of Genghis Khan and the Mongols, but long before them, the steppes were ruled by another power. The Scythians. From about the 9th to the 2nd century BC, the Scythians were the undisputed masters of horseback archery. Imagine a warrior, galloping at full speed, able to turn in the saddle and shoot arrows with pinpoint accuracy. This was the Scythian way of war. They were a nomadic people, and their entire society was built around the horse. They practically lived in the saddle. Their tactics were terrifyingly effective. They perfected the Parthian shot, feigning a retreat to lure enemies into a disorganized chase, only to turn and unleash a deadly volley of arrows. They could harass and wear down massive armies without ever engaging in a major pitched battle. Even the mighty Persian Empire, under Darius the Great, failed to conquer them. The Scythians simply retreated deep into the steppes, stretching the Persian supply lines to the breaking point and bleeding them dry with constant raids. What's more, Scythian society was surprisingly egalitarian in a martial sense. Archaeological discoveries have revealed many Scythian women buried with weapons, bearing battle scars. These weren't just symbolic items. These were warrior women, fighting and dying alongside the men. They were the real-life Amazons that the ancient Greeks wrote about, with a mixture of fear and fascination. The Scythians weren't just a military force. They were a cultural phenomenon that redefined the art of cavalry warfare. Let us leave the open plains and travel south to the dense jungles and vibrant kingdoms of West Africa, a region often overlooked in mainstream military history. Here, in the 18th and 19th centuries, the kingdom of Dahomey rose to prominence, and at the heart of its military might was a unit that struck terror into all who faced them, the Mino, or the Dahomey Amazons. This was an all-female army, and I don't mean a support unit. They were the front-line, elite soldiers of the kingdom. They were officially called the Nanan Matan, which means our mothers, and they were considered the king's wives, though they were sworn to celibacy and dedicated entirely to warfare. Their training was brutal and designed to extinguish all fear and pain. They scaled walls, covered in sharp acacia thorns, fought in mock battles with real weapons, and were trained to be ruthlessly efficient killers. European travelers who witnessed them in action were stunned by their discipline, skill, and sheer ferocity, which they often described as superior to that of their male counterparts. Armed with muskets and massive, razor-sharp machetes, they were the spearhead of the Dahomey army in its conquests of neighboring kingdoms. They were so feared that their mere presence on the battlefield could cause enemy armies to break and flee. They fought valiantly against the French in the Franco-Dahomean Wars, earning the grudging respect of the colonizing forces. The Mino were not just soldiers. They were a symbol of female power and a testament to the fact that courage and skill in battle know no gender. From Africa, let's sail across the Pacific to the islands of the Philippines. Long before Spanish colonization, this archipelago was home to a multitude of distinct warrior cultures, but one of the most respected and feared were the Visayan. The name, Pintados, meaning the painted ones, was given to them by the Spanish because of their elaborate, full-body tattoos. But these weren't just decorations. The tattoos, called patik, were a visual record of a warrior's life and achievements. Each intricate design signified rank, bravery, and the number of enemies they had vanquished. A man with a fully tattooed body was a walking resume of his martial prowess, a living legend to be respected and feared. The Pintados were masters of both land and sea. They were skilled sailors and maritime raiders, using swift, agile warships called Caracoa to control the seas. On land, they were experts in ambush and close-quarters combat, utilizing a variety of unique weapons. They wielded the campilan, a long, fork-tipped sword, and the callus, a wavy-bladed dagger. Their warrior code was deeply intertwined with their spiritual beliefs. They fought not just for territory or plunder, but for honor and to appease their ancestors and deities. This spiritual dimension gave their ferocity a purpose that made them incredibly resilient. The Pintados represent a fascinating example of how art, spirituality, and warfare can be woven together, creating a warrior identity that is as beautiful as it is deadly. Our final journey takes us to the Americas, to the Great Plains of North America. When we think of warriors of this region, the Sioux or the Cheyenne often come to mind, but let's focus on a group whose military and political influence was immense. The Comanche. By the 18th and 19th centuries, the Comanche had established a vast domain in the southern plains, known as the Kamankaria. Their power came from one thing: absolute mastery of the horse. The Comanche were arguably the greatest light cavalry in history. Other cultures rode horses. The Comanche became one with them. They could ride and fight with a skill that seemed almost supernatural to outsiders. A Comanche warrior could slide down the side of his galloping horse, using its body as a shield while firing a volley of arrows from under its neck. They could pick up a fallen comrade from the ground at a full gallop. This incredible equestrian skill made them the dominant force on the plains for over a century. They halted Spanish expansion from the south and French expansion from the east. They raided deep into Mexico, shaping the political landscape of the entire continent. Their military tactics, based on speed, mobility, and decentralized attacks, were perfectly adapted to the wide-open plains. They weren't just raiding tribes. They were an imperial power, controlling trade, exacting tribute, and waging war on a massive scale. The story of the American West cannot be fully understood without acknowledging the power and influence of the Comanche Empire, built on the back of a horse and the skill of its riders. Celtiberians, Scythians, the Mino of Dahomey, the Pintados, the Comanche, 5 warrior cultures, separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, each possessing a unique brand of genius on the battlefield. Their stories prove that courage, skill, and the indomitable warrior spirit are a universal human trait, not confined to 1 or 2 famous names. History is a vast tapestry, and the threads of the Spartans and samurai are bright and bold. But the beauty of the whole picture is only revealed when we also appreciate the other threads, the ones that are just as strong and just as colorful, even if they lie in the shadows. So the next time you think of history's greatest warriors, I hope you'll remember some of these names. The world is full of forgotten heroes and untold epics, just waiting to be rediscovered. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through history. If you enjoyed this and want to uncover more hidden stories, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure. Let me know in the comments which forgotten warrior culture you find most fascinating. Until next time, stay curious.